Imagine being one of the greatest explorers in the world. You have crossed vast oceans. You have survived storms, starvation, and mutiny. You are leading an expedition that could change history forever. Then, on a small island in the Philippines, everything comes to an end. On April 27, 1521, Ferdinand Magellan, the man who led the first expedition to circumnavigate the globe, was killed in battle. Not by a powerful empire, not by a massive army, but by warriors defending their homeland. This is the story of the Battle of Mactan. In the early 1500s, European nations were racing to discover new trade routes. Spices were among the most valuable commodities in the world. Nations such as Portugal and Spain competed fiercely to reach Asia and control the spice trade. Ferdinand Magellan was a Portuguese navigator who believed he could reach the Spice Islands by sailing west. Although Portuguese by birth, he convinced the Spanish crown to support his ambitious expedition. In September 1519, Magellan departed Spain with 5 ships and approximately 270 men. The voyage was brutal. The crew faced storms, disease, hunger, and uncertainty. Some sailors mutinied against Magellan. Others died during the journey. Yet despite the hardships, the expedition continued westward across the Atlantic Ocean, around South America, and into the vast Pacific. After months at sea, the expedition finally reached the islands that would later become known as the Philippines. In March 1521, Magellan arrived in the central Philippines. The local rulers he encountered were not united under a single kingdom. Instead, the region consisted of independent communities led by local chiefs and rulers. One of these leaders was Raja Humabon of Cebu. Magellan established friendly relations with Humabon and sought to strengthen Spanish influence in the region. Humabon eventually agreed to ally himself with the Spaniards. According to historical accounts, many local inhabitants were baptized into Christianity. Magellan believed he was successfully expanding Spanish influence, but not everyone was willing to submit. On the nearby island of Mactan lived a leader named Lapu-Lapu. Unlike Humabon, Lapu-Lapu refused to recognize Spanish authority. He also refused to submit to Humabon's demands. This created a conflict that Magellan believed he could easily resolve. It would prove to be a fatal mistake. Confident in the superiority of European weapons and armor, Magellan decided to personally lead a military expedition against Mactan. Some of his officers advised caution, others questioned the wisdom of becoming involved in local disputes. But Magellan pressed forward. Before dawn on April 27, 1521, Magellan and a force of roughly 60 armed men approached Mactan by boat. What happened next would change history. The waters near the shore were too shallow for the Spanish ships to approach closely. As a result, Magellan and his men were forced to wade through the water before reaching land. This left them exposed and vulnerable. Waiting on the beach were hundreds of warriors loyal to Lapu-Lapu. The exact number remains uncertain, but historical accounts suggest the defenders greatly outnumbered the Spaniards. The battle began with arrows, spears, and stones flying toward Magellan's men. The Europeans possessed swords, crossbows, and firearms. However, their weapons did not provide the overwhelming advantage Magellan expected. The shallow waters slowed their movement. The terrain worked against them, and the defenders knew the area far better than the invaders. As the fighting intensified, the warriors of Mactan focused their attacks on Magellan. According to eyewitness accounts, they noticed that his legs were less protected than the rest of his body. Spears and other weapons struck him repeatedly. Magellan attempted to organize a retreat, but the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Surrounded by enemy warriors, he continued fighting as his men fell back toward their boats. Then came the final moments. A series of attacks brought Magellan to the ground. Once he fell, the warriors closed in. The explorer, who had crossed oceans and connected distant parts of the world, was killed on the shores of Mactan. His body was never recovered. The surviving members of the expedition retreated. The battle was over. Lapu-Lapu and the warriors of Mactan had achieved a remarkable victory. The death of Magellan shocked the expedition. Without its leader, the mission faced enormous challenges. The crew eventually continued the voyage under new commanders. Years later, one surviving ship, the Victoria, returned to Spain. It became the first vessel to successfully complete a circumnavigation of the globe. Magellan himself never finished the journey, yet his expedition changed the world's understanding of geography forever. Meanwhile, Lapu-Lapu became a symbol of resistance. In the Philippines, he is widely remembered as a leader who defended his people against foreign intervention. Today, monuments, schools, and public spaces bear his name. The Battle of Mactan remains one of the most significant events in Philippine history. It was a clash between two very different worlds. One side arrived seeking influence, power, and expansion. The other fought to defend its independence. More than 5 centuries later, the story continues to be told, not only because an explorer died that day, but because it demonstrated a lesson repeated throughout history. Even the most ambitious conquerors can be defeated. On a small island in the Philippines, a battle lasting only a short time altered the course of history, and it ended the life of one of the most famous explorers the world has ever known. This was the Battle of Mactan, the battle that killed Magellan